The Chicago wind cut through my jacket as I hurried down the dimly lit street. My heels clicked against the wet pavement, each step echoing in the empty alley. I should have taken the main road, but I was exhausted from another 12-hour workday and just wanted to get home. That decision almost cost me everything. A figure emerged from the shadows behind a dumpster, blocking my path. Before I could scream, rough hands grabbed my purse strap. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. The man's face was hidden beneath a dark hood, but I saw the glint of something metal in his hand. This was it. I was going to die on a random Tuesday night, alone in an alley. Then everything changed. Another man appeared from nowhere, moving like a shadow himself. He grabbed my attacker with such force that I heard something crack. Within seconds, my mugger was on the ground, groaning in pain. My rescuer stood there, calm and composed, as if he did this every day. Maybe he did. I woke up the next morning convinced it had been a nightmare. But the bruises on my wrist told a different story. My name is Samantha Holden. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a marketing executive at a downtown firm. My life had always been predictable, organized, safe, until last night. I made coffee with shaking hands, replaying everything in my mind. The stranger's face had been partially hidden in the darkness, but I remembered his eyes, sharp, intelligent, dangerous. He hadn't asked if I was okay. He'd simply said, "Go home. Lock your door," then disappeared before I could thank him. When I opened my apartment door to grab the newspaper, something fluttered to the floor. A folded piece of paper, crisp and white. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The message was written in neat, precise handwriting. Be careful. Not everyone is what they seem. No signature, no explanation, just a warning that made my skin prickle with unease. 3 days passed before I saw him again. I'd started taking different routes home, avoiding that alley entirely. But fear had a way of changing your habits. I was at my usual coffee shop on Thursday morning, waiting for my latte, when I felt someone watching me. I turned and nearly dropped my phone. He was sitting in the corner booth, dressed in an expensive dark suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Our eyes met, and something electric passed between us. He stood and walked over with the confidence of someone who owned every room he entered. His presence was magnetic and slightly terrifying. "Samantha," he said, knowing my name without introduction. "We need to talk." I should have walked away. I should have called the police. Instead, I found myself nodding, following him to his table, completely drawn in by the mystery of who this man was and why he seemed to know everything about me. "How do you know my name?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He smiled slightly, a gesture that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I make it my business to know things," he replied. "I'm Lucas Varelli." The name meant nothing to me then. He explained that the mugging wasn't random, that I'd been targeted, though he wouldn't say why. Over the next few days, I noticed things. A black car parked outside my building, the same man in a leather jacket watching my office entrance. I was being followed, and the fear that gripped me was suffocating. Then Lucas appeared again, seemingly out of nowhere, intercepting the man in the leather jacket with just a few quiet words. The watcher disappeared immediately. Lucas turned to me, his expression unwritable. "You're safe now," he said simply. But I didn't feel safe. I felt like I'd stumbled into something far bigger than a random street crime. And Lucas Varelli was at the center of it all. Lucas invited me to dinner that Friday evening. "There's someone I want you to meet," he said mysteriously. Against every rational instinct, I agreed. He picked me up in a sleek black Mercedes, driving us to an upscale Italian restaurant I'd never have afforded on my salary. The someone never appeared, and I realized the invitation had been a pretense. We talked for hours. Lucas was educated, well-spoken, and surprisingly thoughtful. He asked about my work, my family, my dreams. When I questioned him about his life, he deflected with charm and humor. "I'm an import-export," he said vaguely. "Family business." There was something magnetic about him, the way he listened intently, the protective way he'd positioned himself between me and the door, the casual authority in how the restaurant staff treated him like royalty. By the end of the night, I felt both drawn to him and deeply unsettled. Who was Lucas Varelli, and why had he chosen to protect me? The answer came unexpectedly. I was leaving his car when his phone rang. He answered in Italian, his voice dropping to a tone I hadn't heard before. Cold, commanding, dangerous. I caught fragments. Territory, message, consequences. My stomach twisted. When he ended the call, he noticed my expression. Business, he said lightly, but his eyes watched me carefully, gauging my reaction. I wanted to ask directly what kind of business required talk of territories and consequences, but fear held my tongue. Lucas smiled, that enigmatic expression that revealed nothing. You're curious about me, Samantha. I understand that, but some questions are better left unasked. He drove me home in silence, the tension thick between us. I was attracted to him. I couldn't deny that. But I was also terrified of what I might discover if I dug too deep. That night, I lay awake wondering if I should cut all contact with Lucas Varelli before I got in too deep. My coworker, Brittany, came to me in tears on Monday morning. She'd borrowed money from the wrong people. $5,000 she couldn't repay. The men who'd loaned it were threatening her family. I didn't know what to do until I thought of Lucas. I called him, feeling guilty for using his influence but desperate to help my friend. He listened quietly, then asked for details. 24 hours later, Brittany's problem disappeared. She came to work beaming, saying the men had forgiven her debt entirely and apologized for the harassment. How did you do that? I asked Lucas when we met for coffee. He shrugged. I know people who know people. Your friend is safe now. His casual display of power should have frightened me more than it did. Instead, I felt grateful and increasingly dependent on this mysterious man who could solve problems with a single phone call. I was falling for him, and I knew it was dangerous. 2 weeks after we met, Chicago was hit by a massive thunderstorm. I was walking home when Lucas's car pulled up beside me. Get in, he said, and I did without hesitation. Rain hammered the windshield as he drove, neither of us speaking. He pulled into an underground parking garage, and suddenly we were surrounded by silence, just the distant rumble of thunder. Lucas turned to me, his expression intense. You should stay away from me, Samantha. I'm not good for you. Then why do you keep showing up? I whispered. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he leaned across the console and kissed me. It was passionate, desperate, like he'd been holding back for weeks. I kissed him back, my hands tangling in his hair, all my reservations melting away. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. Everything had changed. We'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross, and I knew my safe, predictable life was over forever. I discovered the truth about Lucas's world by accident. I was meeting him near the waterfront when I saw them, two groups of men facing each other in a tense standoff. Lucas was in the middle, his posture relaxed, but his voice carrying absolute authority. Money and packages exchanged hands. Guns were visible beneath jackets. My blood ran cold as understanding crashed over me. Lucas Varelli wasn't just an import-export. He was mafia. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I'd fallen for a criminal, someone who operated outside the law, dealt in violence and intimidation. I should have run. Instead, I stood frozen, watching as Lucas handled the situation with calm efficiency. When he spotted me, his expression flickered, surprise, then resignation. He walked over slowly, giving me time to flee if I wanted. Now you know, he said quietly. I understand if you want to leave. But I didn't leave. Despite everything, I didn't leave. The next few days were torture. I couldn't stop thinking about Lucas, about what he did, about the dangers surrounding him. My logical brain screamed at me to cut all contact, to return to my safe, boring life. But my heart had other ideas. I was falling in love with a man who lived in shadows, who wielded power through fear and loyalty, who could probably destroy me with a word. The conflict tore me apart. I made lists of reasons to stay away from him. I deleted his number from my phone twice, only to re-add it minutes later. I dreamed about him every night, sometimes sweet dreams of his kisses, sometimes nightmares of violence and danger. Finally, I called him. I need time to think, I said. Take all the time you need, Lucas replied, his voice gentle. I'll be here when you're ready, or I'll stay away if that's what you want. The choice was mine, and somehow that made it even harder. I was driving to work 3 days later when it happened. A black SUV came out of nowhere, slamming into my sedan's rear bumper. My car spun wildly, tires screaming against the asphalt. I managed to avoid hitting other vehicles, but my car ended up mounted on the curb, airbag deployed, my head ringing from the impact. Through the cracked windshield, I saw men approaching. Then Lucas was there, emerging from his Mercedes with several other men. The attackers retreated immediately, speeding away. Lucas pulled open my car door, his face pale with fear, the first time I'd seen him truly scared. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, checking me for injuries with shaking hands. I had bruises and a cut on my forehead, but nothing serious. "This was a message," Lucas said grimly. "They're trying to get to me through you." As paramedics arrived, the reality sank in. I wasn't safe anymore. Lucas's enemies had made me a target, and there was no going back. Lucas took me to his penthouse to recover. That night, after the adrenaline faded, he opened up in ways he never had before. We sat on his balcony overlooking the city, and he told me about his childhood, about watching his father build an empire, about the violence he'd witnessed, about the moment he decided to embrace this life instead of running from it. "I was 12 when I first saw someone die," he said quietly. "My father's business partner, betrayed by his own brother. My father made me watch as a lesson about loyalty and trust." His voice was hollow, haunted. I saw the vulnerability beneath his controlled exterior, the boy who'd grown up too fast in a world of brutality and power. "I never wanted this for you," Lucas continued. "I should have stayed away, but I couldn't." I took his hand, understanding finally that Lucas was as trapped by his world as I was becoming. The difference was, he'd been born into it. I'd chosen to enter it for him. Lucas insisted I meet his inner circle. The dinner was held at an exclusive restaurant, the private room filled with impeccably dressed men and women who smiled politely while their eyes assessed me coldly. These were his closest associates, the people who ran his organization. I felt their judgment with every glance. Antonio, his second in command, was particularly intense. "So you were the marketing executive who's captured our boss's attention," he said, his tone neutral, but his eyes calculating. I smiled, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Throughout the dinner, I noticed the subtle power dynamics, the way people deferred to Lucas, the coded language they used, the careful way they watched each other. This wasn't just a criminal organization. It was a family, bound by loyalty and blood, where betrayal meant death. By the end of the evening, I understood the stakes. I wasn't just dating Lucas Varelli. I was entering a world where trust was currency and mistakes were fatal. The betrayal came from within. One of Lucas's trusted lieutenants, a man named Vincent who'd worked with his father, had been feeding information to a rival faction. The discovery rocked Lucas's organization to its core. I was at Lucas's penthouse when Antonio brought the evidence, financial records, recorded conversations, proof of Vincent's treachery. Lucas's face went cold in a way that terrified me. "Where is he?" Lucas asked quietly. Within hours, Vincent was found and brought in. I wasn't allowed to witness what happened next, but I heard raised voices, pleas for mercy, then silence. Lucas returned hours later, his knuckles bruised, his expression haunted. "It's handled," was all he said. But the damage was done. The rival faction had gained critical intelligence, and Lucas's enemies were closing in. I'd barely escaped being caught in one of their traps, saved only by Antonio's last-minute warning. The danger was escalating, and I was right in the middle of it. Lucas made the decision for both of us. "We're leaving the city for a while," he announced. "It's not safe here." He took me to a beautiful lakeside cabin, hidden away in rural Wisconsin. For 3 days, we existed in a bubble away from danger, away from his world. We cooked together, talked for hours, made love under the stars. Lucas showed me a side of himself I'd never seen. Relaxed, playful, almost normal. "If I could leave all of this behind, I would," he confessed one night as we sat by the fireplace. "For you, I'd walk away from everything." I wanted to believe him, but I knew the truth. You didn't just walk away from the Mafia. It was a lifetime commitment, sealed in blood and loyalty. Still, those 3 days gave me hope that maybe somehow we could find a way to build something real together, even surrounded by darkness and danger. The package arrived at my apartment 2 days after we returned to Chicago. I wasn't home, but my building manager called me, nervous. "There's a box addressed to you," he said. "It's unsettling." Lucas insisted on being there when I opened it. Inside was a series of photographs. Me leaving work, me at the coffee shop, me entering Lucas's building. They'd been watching me for weeks, tracking my every movement. The message was clear. They could reach me anywhere, anytime. But it was the final item that made my blood run cold, a bullet with my name engraved on it. Lucas's face went white with fury. "They're escalating," he said grimly. "This ends now." Fear mixed with determination inside me. I refused to be paralyzed by terror. If Lucas's enemies thought they could intimidate me into leaving him, they'd miscalculated. I was scared, but I was also angry. And anger, I was learning, could be a powerful motivator. Lucas planned a confrontation with the rival faction's leader, deliberately putting himself in danger to draw attention away from me. He staged it publicly, at a restaurant both organizations frequented, knowing word would spread. I watched from a distance as Lucas walked in alone, no bodyguards, no backup. It was a show of strength, or a suicide mission. The rival boss, a man named Russo, met with him. Their conversation was tense, aggressive. At one point, Dominic's men surrounded Lucas, hands moving toward weapons. My heart stopped. But Lucas remained calm, speaking words I couldn't hear but that clearly had impact. After 20 agonizing minutes, Dominic laughed and shook Lucas's hand. The meeting ended without violence, but the message had been sent. Lucas had exposed himself, taken the risk, all to redirect their focus from me. When he returned to the car, I threw my arms around him, furious and terrified. "Don't ever do that again," I demanded. He just held me tight, and I felt his heart racing despite his calm exterior. The ally came from an unexpected place. Sofia Martinez had been one of Dominic Russo's most trusted operatives until he'd betrayed her family. She approached Lucas through back channels, offering intelligence in exchange for protection. I was skeptical immediately. "It's too convenient," I told Lucas. "Why would she turn on Russo now?" But Lucas saw potential in the alliance. Sofia provided detailed information about Russo's operations, his vulnerabilities, his next planned moves. The intelligence was valuable, possibly game-changing. Yet something about her felt off. Her eyes were too calculating, her smiles too practiced. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being played, that Sofia's appearance was part of a larger strategy we couldn't see yet. Lucas trusted her, but I didn't. I started my own quiet investigation, using my marketing research skills to dig into Sofia's background. What I found made my blood run cold, but before I could tell Lucas, everything exploded into chaos. I discovered the truth about Lucas's family connections while searching through public records for information on Sofia. The Varelli name appeared in documents dating back decades. Connections to international crime syndicates, ties to political corruption at the highest levels, involvement in operations spanning continents. Lucas wasn't just a local mafia boss. He was heir to a criminal empire that stretched across the globe. His father had been one of the most powerful crime lords in Europe before retiring to Chicago. Lucas had inherited not just his father's organization, but his enemies, his alliances, and his debts. The man I'd fallen in love with was even more dangerous, more powerful, and more trapped than I'd imagined. When I confronted him, Lucas didn't deny it. "I never wanted you to know the full extent of it," he said quietly. "I wanted to protect you from that truth." But the truth was out now, and I had to decide if I could love a man whose very identity was built on violence and power, whose family legacy was written in blood. The betrayal that hurt most came from someone I trusted completely. Brittany, my coworker whose debt Lucas had erased, had been working for Dominic Russo the entire time. She'd been feeding him information about me, about my relationship with Lucas, about our movements and conversations. Every coffee break confidence, every worried discussion about my relationship, had been reported back to Lucas's enemies. I discovered it by accident when I saw her meeting with one of Russo's men outside our office building. I followed them, my heart sinking as I watched money change hands, saw Brittany pass over her phone showing our text conversations. She'd used me, manipulated my friendship, all while I'd thought she genuinely cared. When I confronted her, Brittany didn't even have the grace to look ashamed. "It's just business," she said coldly. "Nothing personal." But it was personal. It was the deepest cut of all, and it taught me a harsh lesson about trust in Lucas's world. The ambush happened on a Friday night. Lucas was meeting with his distribution network at a warehouse on the south side. I wasn't supposed to be there, but something felt wrong. I'd learned to trust my instincts, and they were screaming danger. I arrived to find the warehouse surrounded by Russo's men. Lucas was trapped inside with only Antonio and 2 others. The odds were impossible. Every rational thought told me to call the police, to run, to save myself. Instead, I did something crazy. I pulled the fire alarm in the building next door, creating chaos and confusion. In the resulting panic, with sirens wailing and people evacuating, I managed to get a message to Antonio. They escaped through a back entrance I'd found, using the confusion as cover. Lucas was furious when he found out I'd been there. But he was also alive, and so was I. For the first time, I'd actively participated in his world, used my intelligence and courage to make a difference. I wasn't just a victim or a bystander anymore. The final confrontation came 3 days later. Russo's men found Lucas at his private office, and this time there was no escape. Gunfire erupted, and in the chaos, Lucas was hit. I got the call from Antonio, his voice tight with controlled panic. "He's been shot. We're taking him to our doctor, but it's bad." I rushed to the private clinic where Lucas's organization handled medical emergencies, my heart in my throat. He was on the operating table, blood everywhere, his face pale and drawn. The bullet had missed his heart by inches, but he'd lost a lot of blood. I held his hand as the doctor worked, whispering desperate prayers to a God I hadn't talked to in years. "Don't you dare die on me, Lucas Varelli," I told him fiercely. "We're not done yet." He survived the surgery, but the recovery would be long and dangerous. Russo's faction wouldn't stop just because Lucas was wounded. If anything, they'd see this as the perfect time to finish him. While Lucas recovered, I made a decision. I couldn't fight Russo's men with guns or violence, but I could use my skills in other ways. I spent 3 days barely sleeping, using my marketing expertise to orchestrate a comprehensive strategy. I leaked carefully crafted information to Russo's network, making them believe Lucas' organization was fracturing, that key members were preparing to defect. I created digital evidence of fictional betrayals, sowed seeds of doubt and paranoia. Then, I fed information to federal authorities, anonymous tips about Russo's operations that couldn't be traced back to us but would trigger investigations. I played both sides masterfully, using social engineering and psychological manipulation instead of weapons. When Antonio saw what I'd done, his respect was visible. "You're brilliant," he said with genuine admiration. "Truly brilliant." Lucas's faith in me had been rewarded. I'd found my place in his world, not as a victim or accessory, but as a strategic partner. The rival factions collapsed within 2 weeks. Russo's organization tore itself apart from internal suspicion and federal pressure. He was arrested on money laundering charges, his empire crumbling. Lucas's organization emerged damaged but intact, stronger in some ways for having survived the assault. But Lucas himself was broken emotionally. The betrayals, the violence, the near-death experience, all of it had taken a toll. He talked about leaving, about walking away from everything. "What's the point?" he asked me one night, his voice hollow. "All this power, all this control, and I almost lost everything that mattered." I held him, this powerful man reduced to vulnerability and doubt. "You didn't lose it," I reminded him. "We survived. Together." Slowly I helped him rebuild, not just his organization but his sense of purpose. We emerged from the crisis changed, our relationship forged in fire and blood, stronger than I'd ever imagined possible. We were partners now, in every sense of the word. 6 months later, Lucas' organization had stabilized and reorganized. He'd made changes, stepping back from the most violent aspects of the business, delegating more to Antonio and others. He'd created distance from the darkness that had almost consumed him. We were sitting on his penthouse balcony, watching the Chicago skyline light up as the sun set. "I never thought I could have this," Lucas said quietly, his arm around me. "A normal moment. Peace." I leaned into him, thinking about how far we'd both come. I wasn't the same scared marketing executive who'd been mugged in an alley. I was stronger, wiser, more confident. I'd learned to navigate a world I'd never imagined entering, had proven myself capable and resilient. Our love had been tested by danger, betrayal, and violence. It had survived. "I love you, Samantha Holden," Lucas said, pulling me close. "I love you, Lucas Varelli." I replied. Our story wasn't conventional, it wasn't safe or simple. But it was ours, a tale of danger, passion, loyalty, and triumph. And as the city lights sparkled below us, I knew I wouldn't change a single moment of it.